The music still pulsed, a deafening wave of bass and light in the VIP section of Pacha nightclub, Ibiza. But the man surrounded by millionaires and flashing lights wasn't just a tourist. He was a fugitive, a ghost operating under an alias. This wasn't just a drug dealer. This was the invisible architect of a colossal international criminal enterprise. The architect was barely an adult, just 23 years old. His operation was high-tech, cross-continental, and seemingly impregnable. From his remote bases in Europe, Eddie Burton orchestrated a network that smuggled a staggering 307 kilograms of Class A and B narcotics, heroin, cocaine, and ketamine into the UK. The estimated street value? An eye-watering 320 million. He was a logistical genius who followed a single rule: never touch the product. He didn't drive the lorries. He didn't handle the cash. He was completely remote, operating with burner phones and military-grade encryption, convinced his distance made him untouchable. But here is the most crucial, most unbelievable piece of information. For all his invisible genius, for all his careful planning, for all his reliance on technology and third-party mules, Eddie Burton was caught by a single, physical fact. A minute, molecular trace left behind on the packaging of a drug shipment that should never have been found. His most trusted and equally careful partner, a woman named Sian Banks, made an identical amateur mistake. How did this criminal mastermind, who believed his youth and distance protected him, leave the very one thing, his fingerprint that led straight to the handcuffs in Ibiza? The story of the invisible architect is the story of how cutting-edge forensics and old-fashioned police work demolished a modern, multi-million-pound empire built on the illusion of control. His story begins in Liverpool, where he entered the criminal world at an age when most children are focused on school and playing Nate, just 10 years old. He didn't start as a kingpin. He was a runner, used by older boys for simple, low-risk tasks. Short walk, a plastic bag, a nod. His small frame and innocent appearance made him the perfect camouflage. He was harmless to outsiders, but inside, a dangerous mind was forming. He wasn't just running for them, he was studying them. By age 13, he'd absorbed the fundamentals: how to spot police before they spotted him, when to talk, and more importantly, when to vanish. Family members later described him as a tearaway, too smart, too angry, always pushing boundaries, but it wasn't chaos he sought. It was control. He wanted to move vast amounts of weight without ever directly contaminating himself with the product or the violence. However, by the time he was 16, Burton was giving the orders. His local education was complete, and he recognized the ceiling in Liverpool was too low, crowded with egos and watching eyes. At 19, he made his strategic move. He slipped out of the country dominated 7 no missing persons report, just a quiet flight and a different name on a lease in Amsterdam. In Amsterdam, the structure began. He lived small, rented short-term, and constantly changed phones. He wasn't focused on violence or flashy displays of wealth. He obsessed over logistics, ferry schedules, freight company procedures, and driving hours. He built his supply line as a manager and coordinator, not an importer. Soon after, he added Spain as a second base to 97A layer of distance cover and silence. He moved people, couriers with clean records, drivers who asked no questions. Each a quiet link in a chain. None saw the full picture. The boy who once delivered weed in a school bag was now, at 21, building something industrial. While Burton built his empire in mainland Europe, the indispensable core of the UK operation was Sian Banks. She wasn't just an associate. She was the logistical bridge that ensured Burton 92's remote structure didn't become a fatal weakness. Temzerant to the outside world, she maintained a convincing facade. Her social media was a carefully curated display of lifestyle aspiration. But behind the soft, filtered light, Banks was deeply immersed in the grittier reality of the empire. Money laundering, briefing couriers, checking, changing, and covering routes. Savoy the travel was telling. Between June 2022 and October 2023, Banks flew to Amsterdam and Spain nearly every month. Always short stays, always alone. This relentless, seemingly normal travel was later revealed to be critical to the network's function. Phone evidence proved she wasn't always traveling light. On at least 2 trips, she returned to the UK with commercial quantities of cocaine and ketamine hidden in her luggage. With no prior criminal record, she passed through arrivals unnoticed, another holidaymaker blending into the crowd. Her messages with Burton after one seizure offered a glimpse into their ruthless coordination. Her prints might be on the bags, she texted, referring to the money. Burton 92's reply was cold reassurance. No one had her prints on file anyway. They thought they were untouchable. They thought their encryption and Banks and 92's calm demeanor were enough. They were wrong. The meticulously built system began to crack, not with violence, but with a quiet red flag at the border. It was meant to be routine. A commercial HGV rolling into Dover, paperwork clean, driver calm, boxes loaded. But Border Force officers flagged the vehicle anyway. Inside, hidden beneath legitimate goods and taped-up cartons, they found the first payload, 90 kilograms of ketamine and 50 kilograms of cocaine. This was July 3, 2022. This single seizure, with an estimated street value in the millions, was the first concrete lead against the network. The network responded not by stopping, but by adapting, convinced this was an isolated incident. 6 weeks later, a second lorry was seized. Different driver, different concealment. This time, the method was professional, industrial, a modified, reinforced, and sealed fuel tank. Inside, investigators found a second, larger haul, 142 kilograms of cocaine and 25 kilograms of heroin. The combined total of the 2 seizures was the full extent of the operation revealed. 307 kilograms, valued at $320 million. The drivers didn't have answers, but the seized loads did. This is where Burton's illusion of control collapsed. Forensic science confirmed his greatest fear. His prints were found on the wrapping of the bags inside the adapted fuel tank, linking him directly not to the transport, but to the preparation. He had briefly touched what was meant to remain invisible. Crucially, Sian Banks 92's prints were found on the ketamine bags from the very first seizure, the one that should have served as a warning. The National Crime Agency, NCA, immediately launched a digital review. The pair thought their encryption gave them immunity. They used Signal and WhatsApp, coded language, and throwaway numbers, wiping devices every few weeks. But the NCA recovered logs, transfers, and flight data, which were the real roadmap. The pair communicated like corporate logistics managers, discussing the thing or the run, and using specific emojis that might have a snowflake for cocaine, a pill for MDMA day, 97 all, of which matched up perfectly with seizure dates and locations. They saved nothing, but the phone logs saved everything. Sazua Ononjuais. The travel trail sealed Banks 92's fate. Her boarding passes, hotel check-ins, and return flights days before each seizure demonstrated she was in the room when the bags were sealed. She wasn't an online accomplice, she was physically present and coordinating. Adding weight to the prosecution. 92's case was Banks 92's audacious side hustle. Investigators uncovered a scam she ran during the COVID-19 pandemic, selling doctored travel documents, fake test results, and altered vaccine records. This wasn't just a side earner, it was an operational advantage and a tool to ensure her essential movements through Europe went completely unnoticed, while others were grounded. She wasn't just running drugs, she was running interference. However, by mid-2023, the case file was overwhelming. Every detail pointed to Burton as the man behind the curtain. The evidence was strong, but they needed him on British soil. He had become the subject of a multi-agency manhunt led by the NCA in partnership with Dutch and Spanish authorities. So they didn't have to wait long. Burton, confident in his alias and distance, had made the critical mistake of settling into a high-profile life in Ibiza. In August 2023, Spanish police moved on their target, finding Burton in the VIP section of Pacha. The arrest was swift. He didn't struggle. He simply stood still. The alias ID didn't 92 matter. The fingerprints did. He was held while extradition paperwork was processed through Germany and finalized by the UK's National Extradition Unit. In March 2024, Burton was flown back to Britain under guard. The 2-year investigation had reached its final, physical stage. In the meantime, Banks had already been brought down. She was arrested at her home in Liverpool in December 2023. There was no fanfare and 97, just a knock at the door and an evidence folder that removed all doubt. Her seized phone, with its detailed records of encrypted chats and drop-off instructions, provided the final critical pieces of evidence. The culmination arrived on February 12, 2025, at Canterbury Crown Court. The courtroom didn't require a lengthy backstory. It had transcripts, timelines, and the physical contents of 2 massive lorries. Burton and Banks stood separately in the dock, avoiding eye contact, their shared criminal venture now a broken, isolated reality. Eddie Burton, 23, pleaded guilty to 4 counts of importing Class A and B drugs, heroin, cocaine, ketamine, and cannabis. The judge made it clear Burton was a coordinator of exceptional reach who used encrypted systems and distance to shield himself. His belief that living abroad meant living beyond the reach of UK law was demonstrably false. Sian Banks, 25, admitted to 7 offences, including drug importation, money laundering, and direct coordination. The court flatly rejected any claim that she was a passive participant or coerced partner. The judge called her indispensable, noting that her calm and logistical skills were the very reason the operation was able to function as long as it did. The sentencing was a decisive verdict on the scale of their ambition. Eddie Burton was sentenced to 24 years in prison, a full term weighed not just by the drugs, but by the sophisticated criminal structure he built. Sian Banks received 17 years. The final sentences served as a definitive warning from the National Crime Agency. They stressed that the modern drug trade often avoids street violence and instead relies on logistics, digital anonymity, and sophisticated cover. The NCA called the case a reminder that modern criminals mistakenly believe distance and technology provide absolute protection. The May 320 million empire they built in silence collapsed under the weight of its own meticulously tracked evidence. But as the NCA dismantles these encrypted networks, where will the next invisible architect hide?